is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories: President Biden's planned tax hike for rich Americans rattles the markets. We're live on Wall Street.
Our other headlines: the EU signs the world's biggest vaccine supply deal as it aims to jab 70% of adults by July.
Angela Merkel denies involvement in the Wirecard scandal at an inquiry into one of Germany's largest fraud cases.
The battle to breathe, India's desperate fight with COVID. Oxygen supply is short as infections surge to a new world record. Also coming up.
I'm in Belfast, where tensions have been rising in recent weeks. We'll be taking a look at the reasons behind the rioting in the city.
US President Joe Biden's plans to raise taxes on America's most wealthy has unsettled markets. He's proposing to almost double capital gains tax rates and increase income tax on those earning more than $1 million a year.
Biden says the increases will pay for extra spending on childcare and education and tilt the US economy in favor of workers and away from the super wealthy.
Let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. So, John, how is Wall Street reacting to Biden's tax plans for the super rich?
Well, I wasn't going to do this, as we are a news program, and this is the lead story. But Jamie Owen put me up to it. OK, so here's an impression of how Wall Street reacted. Are you ready? That is exactly what was going on here yesterday. I mean, total shock. Total shock, and I'm not even kidding. On November the 4th, I well remember being on our program and saying to you guys, look, Wall Street is prepared to work with Biden. They're okay with it because he's got a slim majority in the Senate and the House, and Wall Street thinks that will crimp any excessive plans. So when they realized that they were going to get a doubling of capital gains tax, essentially, they were absolutely stunned. And the Dow went straight down like that. If you look at the graph for Thursday, it's all doing quite nicely, and then it literally falls off a cliff. Now, what is capital gains tax? Well, it's a tax that's applied to assets that grow in value, that appreciate in value, and then you pay it when you sell that asset, and that applies particularly to stocks and to bonds and also cryptocurrency, which is why Bitcoin is down quite so much today, because we think people have been selling it off because they don't want to risk paying the higher tax that they will have to pay. Biden is proposing a tax of 43.4% for people who earn more than $1 million a year. And it may come as some surprise to people around the world, but that's quite a few people here in America, certainly in Wall Street. So we think that things have calmed down a bit now. The markets have settled a lot. And in fact, the Dow was in the green when I checked it a few moments ago. It's possible that the White House is what they call flying a kite, that this is a sort of trial balloon that's gone up to see what the reaction would be were this tax to go up by pretty much double. An announcement is expected sometime next week, so we'll just have to wait and see. But it was shock, I promise you, Paul.
Yeah, it certainly seems so. John, in other news, New York City is suing 3 oil majors over global warming.
Yes.
What more can you tell us about that?
A bit of an odd one, I think, this. You have to remember that New York State and New York City is very much controlled by the left. We have a Democratic governor, Andrew Cuomo, and a very Democratic mayor, Bill de Blasio. They're very conscious here in New York, especially now, under this administration, of the issue regarding climate change. And so they're going after 3 of the big oil majors, and they are Exxon, Shell and BP, and also something called the American Petroleum Institute, which I assume is some kind of organization that speaks up for them. Now, the accusation is that through advertising and through social media, what these oil majors have done is hurt the people of New York by hiding the fact that fossil fuels are in fact very dangerous, hiding the fact that they're more dangerous than they appear in the advertising. So the claim is that the majors have basically been pretending to be, you know, as it were, environmentally friendly, when really all the time they're not. Now, they say, look, You've tried this before. There's a similar lawsuit which recently was just dismissed by the judges, and we think that this is going to happen this time round as well. And they say, look, people of New York, why do you put fuel in your car? Because you want to go to work or you want to go to the shops, not because we tell you to in our advertising. Why do you put oil in your radiators to heat your apartment? Just that, not because we tell you. So they think it's all going to fall apart. But it was a major announcement by Mayor de Blasio here, who, as I say, is very much of the left, for Earth Day. And just for the record, the other thing that he announced is that all school buses in New York City will be completely electric by the year 2035. That's just an aside. And, of course, it comes, or that announcement came, on day one of the virtual climate summit, which has been going on around the world. President Xi making news by phasing out coal consumption by the year 2026, and Joe Biden cutting U.S. emissions by more than Paris required him to, at 52% by the year 2030, by the decade's end. People here now saying, OK, Joe, it's a good idea. How are you actually going to do it? So we'll have to wait and see. The one thing, though, about the climate conference, it did bring together the big polluters of the US, China and Europe. They're on the same page again, even if they're not quite at the same point as each other. Jamie and Paul?
John, as ever, thank you so much. John Terrett there in New York City.
Well, as John was saying, it's day two of that US-hosted Leaders Summit on Climate. On Thursday, President Biden committed the US to accelerating its reduction in carbon emissions and encouraged other major economies to follow suit. Friday's session highlighting technological innovation in tackling the climate crisis. Speakers include, of course, world leaders, as well as climate activists and entrepreneurs like Bill Gates and Michael Bloomberg, who said reducing reliance on coal is key.
Coal plants are the single biggest contributor to climate change, and they spew toxic, deadly pollution into the air. The good news is clean energy is increasingly cheaper than coal in much of the world. That's one reason why more cities, states, and businesses are committing to reach net zero emissions.
European economies are beginning to show signs of recovery from their pandemic-induced downturns. UK businesses are reporting a surge in orders, with the Composite Purchasing Managers Index rising to 60.0, its highest since 2013. Retail sales jumped higher than expected in March as vaccination rollouts and easing of lockdown measures boosted confidence.
Meanwhile, the Eurozone is also reporting a surprise return to growth despite the threat of a fresh wave of coronavirus. Manufacturers across the EU are reporting their most active months since 1997, with near record output in Germany and France. But activity in the services sector remains sluggish due to lockdowns.
Turkey has launched an international manhunt for the founder of one of its major cryptocurrency exchanges, Bodex. It's feared that Faruk Fatih Özer has fled the country with $2 billion worth of investors' assets from fraudulent sales. Police have detained more than 60 people as part of the investigation.
Panasonic says it will buy U.S. supply chain software company Blue Yonder for $7.1 billion. The Japanese electronics giant says the need for more intelligent supply chains has been dramatically heightened by the pandemic. Blue Yonder has more than 3,000 clients worldwide, including Walmart and Coca-Cola.
Toy maker Mattel has reported its strongest first-quarter revenues in 6 years. Demand for Barbie dolls and action figures soared during the pandemic. Net sales rose 47% year-on-year, with products including American Girl dolls, Hot Wheels cars, and Uno card games flying off the shelves.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead.
You've heard about the chip shortage stalling world car production. I'll tell you about the next looming crisis: batteries.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to the Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. Also on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Well, after months of rather dispiriting news from Europe, there's some optimism for a brighter summer. The EU chief now expects 70% of Europe's adults will be vaccinated by July, a huge improvement on an earlier target of summer's end.
Let's talk to our correspondent Tony Waterman in Brussels. So, Tony, where's this optimism coming from?
Well, from an increase in vaccine supplies and deliveries across the bloc, which was always expected in the second quarter of this year, particularly heading into the second half of this year. But frankly, a lot of this optimism has to do with Pfizer-BioNTech, which has become the absolute backbone of the bloc's vaccination efforts. Brussels, which has been spearheading these procurements of these different vaccines, is now on the verge of clinching, which would be the world's largest vaccine supply deal, and that is fueling optimism across the bloc.
In the global race to vaccinate, it's about keeping your friends close and your reliable vaccine makers even closer.
It was an impressive tour through the manufacturing site.
Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen on Friday paid a visit to the Pfizer manufacturing plant in Puurs, Belgium, as Europe's immunization efforts grow increasingly dependent on the vaccine maker. 600 million doses are expected this year, enough to offset shortfalls from other suppliers, most notably AstraZeneca.
With the enormous efforts of BioNTech Pfizer and the acceleration of their vaccine deliveries, I'm now confident that we will have sufficient doses to vaccinate 70% of the adult population in the European Union already in July.
Brussels expects to clinch another deal with Pfizer in the coming days to supply an additional 1.8 billion doses to tackle future variants.
As of today, I'm very proud to say that we have shipped more than 100 million doses to the EU, meeting all our supply commitments to the European Commission.
The same cannot be said about AstraZeneca, whose chronic delivery shortfalls have reportedly prompted Brussels to prepare legal action. EU capitals have been asked to sign off on the move. Most appear to be on board, but Brussels on Friday refused to be publicly drawn into the fray.
I have strictly no comments to make on this issue. As I've said, we haven't made any decisions.
Legal action or not, AstraZeneca is being phased out of the bloc's vaccine program. An option to purchase 100 million additional doses recently lapsed, and Brussels has indicated it won't renew its contract.
The bloc's vaccine strategy is also pivoting from old-school vaccine technology to cutting-edge and highly effective mRNA technology, which underpins the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna vaccines.
Neither of those jabs have been linked to the exceedingly rare but deadly blood clots that have tarnished AstraZeneca's image in Europe and abroad, making them prime candidates to lead efforts to stamp out the virus.
And just about in the last hour or so, the EU's drugs regulator, the EMA, held a press conference with some updated information on the AstraZeneca vaccine, which, of course, they, in just the past week or so, had linked to possible blood clots. And they said that it still remains safe across all age groups. They had done an intense study looking at data sets and comparing the different age groups with these very rare but serious blood clots, and found that even for younger people, even for these younger people, that it still remains safe. But that also takes into consideration, which is quite crucial here, that this includes areas that have very high infection rates. So it may not be the same information or the same type of situation when it comes for younger people who are living in areas that don't have as high of infection rates. Although Emma making it very clear that it's recommending that the vaccine continue to be used across all of the age groups.
Tony Waterman in Brussels, many thanks.
Scientists from Oxford University say they've developed the world's most effective malaria vaccine. The jab showed up to 77% efficacy in the trial involving 450 children in Burkina Faso. Malaria infects millions of people every year and kills more than 400,000, most of them children in Africa. The researchers say they hope the vaccine can be approved within 2 years.
Angela Merkel is the latest German politician to face tough questions about the now defunct financial services company Wirecard. The Chancellor has been criticised for her lobbying of the firm just months before it collapsed. A week of testimony into how much support the government gave Wirecard has just come to an end at the German Parliament. Ryan Thompson has the story.
Friday was the big day in the German parliament's inquiry into government relations with Wirecard, the multi-billion-dollar payment firm that suddenly went bust last summer after it lost about $2.3 billion in cash. This moment had been building all week. It started on Wednesday with the Justice Minister taking the stand, then the Finance Minister, and finally this moment with the Chancellor herself. Angela Merkel rejected criticism of lobbying that she did for Wirecard as Chancellor while on a visit to China because it was only months before the firm collapsed. She said she had no reason to suspect that the firm was not following the law, and she was doing as any head of state might do on a state visit, helping German firms expand their presence abroad. In fact, Wirecard at the time was aiming to acquire a similar Chinese payment processing company. There's also one meeting that's specifically raising eyebrows. It came just before Merkel's trip to China. She met with former economy minister Karl Thutter zu Guttenberg, who lobbied for Wirecard in Germany, but she told lawmakers that she couldn't actually remember if he brought up the company in their meeting, and pointed out that Wirecard's auditor had actually given the company a green light at that point. On Thursday, Olaf Scholz, her deputy and the finance minister here in Germany, blamed Wirecard's auditor, EY, for failing to catch the fraud. And so far, the evidence uncovered by investigators doesn't seem to suggest that there's been any criminal action by government officials, but reputation-wise, it is quite damaging. Some lawmakers suggest that top officials have either shown a degree of ignorance or turned a blind eye to bad bookkeeping of Wirecard just months before the firm collapsed. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
At least 14 patients being treated for coronavirus have died after a fire broke out in an intensive care unit in the Indian state of Maharashtra.
Health officials say the country is in crisis, with hospitals overwhelmed and running out of oxygen. India has reported the world's highest number of daily infections for a second day, passing 330,000 new cases. Ravinder Bauer reports.
It is a critical situation as far as the capital city is concerned. A number of hospitals are raising an alarm that they have oxygen left just to last for a few more hours, and they have to return a lot of patients who are coming with low oxygen in their bodies to these hospitals because they do not have oxygen to supply or to give them or to treat them. And that is exactly what the chief minister of the city has today said in a meeting with the Prime Minister, where he was seen begging from the Prime Minister that he should supply more oxygen to the city, to the capital, and also ensure that the tankers which are stuck on the borders are allowed to come in by those states which they are crossing. Of course, taking stock of the situation, a major decision has been taken to involve the Indian Armed Forces in terms of lifting the empty tankers from the cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and all the other places which are suffering a shortage of oxygen, and to fly them to the oxygen plants. And then those filled tankers will be brought back to these places via Indian Railways, because liquid medical oxygen cannot be airlifted. So that is one plan. The other one is to connect with Germany and to uplift, to airlift these mobile oxygen plants, which will be then given to most of the states in their army hospitals. And from there, the whole area will be supplied oxygen. So these are some steps which have been taken today, but this is going to take time to, make an impact on the ground. But definitely the situation is not looking very good, because people are losing their lives because they do not have oxygen available for them to last longer, and that is becoming a situation which is out of control.
Ravinder Bauer there reporting from Delhi.
India has now joined the UK's red list of countries effectively banning travel as concerns grow over soaring cases and new variants. It means only British or Irish nationals can enter the UK from India, and they must isolate in a government-approved hotel at their own cost. Heathrow Airport says it was refusing to allow extra flights from India before the restrictions came into force.
At least one climber on Mount Kwomolangma, also known as Everest, has tested positive for COVID-19, and there are reports a Sherpa in the man's party also has the virus. The outbreak will come as a blow to Nepal, which relies on income from expeditions to the mountain. The world's tallest peak only reopened to climbers after being closed for a year due to the pandemic.
Ford has become the latest car maker to be hit by the global semiconductor chip shortage. It's closing one of its UK plants for a month. This comes as Daimler warns that the shortage may continue to hit sales. Despite this, Daimler is forecasting its highest profit in years from its Mercedes-Benz vehicles as the global economy starts to recover, and expects an annual return of 10 to 12%, up 2% from a previous forecast.
The global shortage of chips has been worsened by Taiwan's worst drought in decades. It makes 2/3 of the world's semiconductor chips. Taiwan has been dealing with a shortage of water after no typhoons made landfall last year, a first in 56 years. But the manufacturing process requires a lot of water, with billions of gallons used to avoid contamination.
The global shortage of chips isn't the only thing affecting the electric car market. Battery manufacturers can't keep up either.
While the global market share of electric cars is revving up, battery makers are struggling to keep up. The current mining capacity of lithium, a key ingredient in batteries, falls so short of predicted demands that prices could triple towards the end of the decade. Here's Juliette Mann with more.
Thanks, Paul. Well, the EU has calculated that to meet its targets for electric vehicle batteries and energy storage, it will need up to 18 times more lithium and 5 times more cobalt in 2030, and almost 60 times more lithium and 15 times more cobalt in 2050. Now, here's the good news. There's plenty of lithium in the ground, but the mining capacity isn't there. Now, while some countries like the UK are phasing out new internal combustion engine vehicles in the next decade or so, that's going to encourage a switch to cleaner, greener electric vehicles. The fast rise of those is set to create a serious lithium supply deficit from about 2027, and that could get bigger as time goes on and cause delays for the production of millions of electric passenger cars, buses, trucks and hybrids. And that is going to affect prices of lithium and other key minerals that are used in batteries like cobalt, copper and nickel. But let's take a look at lithium. The metal's value saw an 160% surge from 2015 to 2018's record high of $17,000 per tonne. That was before the market started to calm down. The prices dropped back to around $8,200 a tonne in 2020 and nearly reached break-even points for mega producers in China. But because lithium prices are currently very low, and some mines are operating at below the operational market cost of production, there's not much incentive to invest the huge sums required for the anticipated electric car future. Well, James Lay is a global energy metals analyst at Rystad Energy, and I asked him, is it as simple as just mining more?
I think the problem has been for the lithium industry is that the last 2 years have been very kind of ropey. The lithium price has been very low. There was a lot of supply of lithium that entered the markets from Australia to respond to a Chinese boom in sort of 2016-17. It kind of overshot, really, and then we've had a lot of mines going into care and maintenance, being put on hold. So I think there's a lot of caution from some parts of the world to bringing new investment on stream to meet this future demand, and that's obviously leading up to the problems that we anticipate could come through later in this decade.
Also, though, when it comes to mining lithium, it's not as simple as a process as extracting oil, is it? There's time here. It's not just about getting all your financial ducks in a row.
And that's the thing. I should just stress to start with, there isn't a shortage of lithium. It's an abundant mineral, and we think it can easily, there's enough lithium to meet the demand for electric vehicles further out. But as you say, coming from a kind of concept through to actually bringing that operation on stream, if we look at hard rock mines, we look at normally around 5 years, and for the salt brine deposits in South America, it's up to 7 years. And it's this time taken to bring these operations on stream that is causing the potential bumps in the road ahead for that supply-demand balance.
But lithium ion isn't the only key ingredient for batteries for electric vehicles. I mean, is this the point where car makers should rip up the rule book and start redesigning?
I think it's still early. I think lithium, based on its properties, it's essential in kind of all of the batteries. It's super light, its energy properties. So I think any of the designs that they come through, they're likely to have a lithium component in them. Same thing with often with cobalt for its fire resistance that's needed with the batteries. So it does become difficult. But obviously designs have evolved recently. We've seen the nickel batteries kind of take hold with particularly for the likes of Tesla, which do drastically lower that cobalt content because there was a huge surge in the pricing then. So I think there are some elements and there is some ability to redesign, but I think a lot of these key battery raw material minerals, you are going to need them in most of the designs coming forwards and the future designs.
On the other hand, are we making too much of this? I mean, I know many European countries are saying, right, we're going to get rid of internal combustion engines by the 2030s. But many forecasters you speak to, they say that up to 80% of new cars are still going to be fossil fuel powered.
Yeah, so I mean, in Rystad, we do forecast that there'll be a larger uptake of electric vehicles out sort of in the 2030, 2040 period. But I think it kind of goes back a little bit to the mining, that I suppose some of them are sitting waiting to see, is this a bubble that could burst, or do we have the confidence to go ahead and invest significantly to deliver the raw materials for this industry moving forward?
Japan has declared a short and powerful state of emergency in its biggest cities in an effort to halt a rapid rise in COVID-19 cases. Restaurants and bars will close and sporting events held without spectators. Japan needs to contain the virus in order to hold the Olympics in 3 months' time.
It comes as Tokyo's motor show has been cancelled for the first time in its 67-year history. It's usually held every 2 years and had been scheduled to go ahead in October. The last event attracted around 1.3 million visitors.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, weeks of rioting in Belfast, where sectarian violence has reared its head once more.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very busy when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Paul Barber. The headlines again. US President Joe Biden's planned tax hike for rich Americans has rattled the markets.
The EU signs the world's biggest vaccine supply contract as it aims to jab 70% of adults by July.
And Angela Merkel denies wrongdoing in the Wirecard scandal at an inquiry into one of Germany's largest fraud cases.
Well, it's day two of the US-hosted Leaders Summit on Climate. On Thursday, President Biden committed the United States to accelerating its reduction in carbon emissions and encourage other major economies to follow suit. Let's talk to Isabel Hilson, who writes extensively on the environment and China and is the founder of China Dialogue. Isabel, Michael Bloomberg was speaking at this event, saying the world really must reduce its reliance on coal and coal-fired power stations. How big of a challenge is that for a country like China?
Well, China has one of the biggest challenges in coal because coal is the fossil fuel that China has in great abundance, and essentially it was what China built its industrial revolution on. So although the dependence has come down a little bit, it is still the biggest primary energy source in China, and to make that transition is a massive task.
Is it possible?
It's certainly possible, and a lot of people have plotted the scenarios. What it does require, though, is a very rapid further increase in renewables, probably an expansion of nuclear, and it needs to start pretty soon. One thing that people were listening very carefully to President Xi's speech to see whether he was going to announce a more rapid drawdown of coal than we've seen so far. There was some expectation in the 14th five-year plan that coal would begin to, go out of favor, but all he promised was that there would be a control on the expansion in the 14th five-year plan, and that the reduction in coal wouldn't really begin until the 15th five-year plan. Now that means that China's emissions won't peak anything before 2025. And what that means, if you look at the modelling that climate modelers do, it means that with a late start, if you like, the challenge is the greater after 2030. So if you act early and you act, decisively now on coal, it makes life easier after 2030 to imagine meeting that 2060 goal that Xi Jinping set at the UN General Assembly last year.
Day two of this summit is focused on the technological solutions to the climate crisis. How can China contribute to that?
Well, China has contributed enormously because for 10 years China's been investing in the production of renewable technologies. So wind and solar, China's by far the biggest supplier, really, of the world's needs in that respect. China's investing in electric vehicles in a major way, in battery technologies, in pretty much all the low-carbon technologies. Now, there is a whole kind of there's a whole set of technologies which are not yet mature, which are going to be pretty important. For example, there's much talk of the hydrogen economy for those very hard to abate emissions. If you're making steel, aluminium, things that need a real kind of burst of energy, very concentrated, then possibly hydrogen will do it. And then when we get to the 2050, 2060 scenarios, there's a chunk of emissions which are just very hard to abate. And all scenarios have carbon capture at that point. The idea that we're going to have to remove the last bits of carbon to get to that net zero, to get to stability. Now, that technology is really not mature. And to make it work at scale, I guess China could certainly contribute to that.
Isabel Hilton in London, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Belfast has been the scene of rioting over the past few weeks, a once common sight on the streets of the Northern Ireland capital. It was thought the unrest had been consigned to the history books, but Brexit has contributed to reopening political divisions. Our correspondent Andrew Wilson is at the Peace Wall in Belfast. Andrew, what's the atmosphere like now?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer in a definitive way, Jamie. It's certainly been calm for the last few days, but there's been a reminder in the last couple of weeks to the people of Northern Ireland that an absence of violence does not necessarily mean that peace is underway. There's a lot more going on beneath the surface. There's a recognition that the Brexit arrangement with the Northern Ireland Protocol, the distancing of Northern Ireland from the UK mainland, has disappointed the unionist community to the point that vulnerable parts of the community have been inspired to get involved in street rioting again. And that's been a wake-up call for everyone across the area of Northern Ireland. They've realised that not only is this a political and sectarian problem, which looks all too familiar to the bad old days, but there's an economic message that is now being discussed here in Belfast and beyond. An economic message that suggests that some elements of the community here have been left behind by the last 23 years, have been ignored, have not been given the opportunities they thought they would get in the peace process, and that has made them vulnerable to radical messages. So when the sectarian groups want to stir up trouble, they have a ready set of populations here in the centre of West Belfast, either side of this so-called peace wall where I'm standing. People, young teenagers who weren't even alive when the peace process was signed, are able to be stirred up, given Molotov cocktails, and start things over again. Now, it's not taking us back to the bad old days at this stage, but it has got people worried. A fortnight of sporadic rioting in Belfast has raised the spectre of a return to sectarian violence. Police have been injured as young loyalists have violently pushed back against Brexit and the perceived barrier it creates between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Feelings that hardline unionist politicians at Stormont are happy to echo and aim at the leadership in Westminster.
My message to Boris Johnson is to recognise that he betrayed Northern Ireland, that he was being less than truthful when he told us there would be no border in the Irish Sea, that he has partitioned the United Kingdom. If he is a unionist, if he believes in the unity and integrity of the United Kingdom, then he has to unstitch the very deal that he did, because it is that deal which is destroying the integrity of the United Kingdom.
Religious leaders, Catholic and Protestant, have, in a show of unity, called for calm and respect for the fragility of the peace process.
For 23 years, we have been learning how to talk peaceably to each other since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. Street violence has the effect of being like a solvent that dissolves the glue of community cohesion. It colours and shapes our ability to talk, and it affects the tone of our conversations when we're in the room.
Some call it the perfect storm, sectarian tensions ignited by policies created in Westminster. This isn't just about Brexit. Of course, that's a big part of it, perhaps even the catalyst behind the recent rioting. But this is a society surrounded by reminders of its violent past, ghosts from history that might be more alive than people care to admit. And some locals accuse sectarian leaders of exploiting those trapped at the bottom of Northern Ireland's economic ladder.
Those kids who are rioting, what possible future do they have when a system that is based upon the foundations of capitalism and democracy that abandons them, where do they fit in? And when you put a Molotov cocktail in their hand or a brick in their hand and say, you're fighting for your tribe here, and you get them to feel like they belong to something, that's the issue. And I don't think we're past that point yet.
An absence of violence isn't necessarily a peace process, but a door has been opened, and 23 years of change have left a positive mark. But any turbulence and the fragility shows. Another bump in the road, which everyone knew was going to be a challenge.
Andrew, this is a complicated community. What possible avenues are there to peace?
I think the avenues are still there, Jamie. We're not back anywhere near to 20,000 British troops being stationed across Northern Ireland with roads fenced off and patrols in the streets and bombings and shootings. That's all still in the past and takes quite some revival. But there are armed groups out there somewhere biding their time. So there is an energy that wants to destroy this peace process. The trouble is, there is a lot of motivation also to keep this peace process going. We understand now that 23 years is not a long time in Northern Irish history. There's still plenty of work to be done. But speaking as I did, for example, to Dr. David Bruce, you saw in my report, he said the door has been opened for discussions and we're not going to allow it to close. A framework has been created and it's been backed up with structures and institutions, all dedicated and financed towards pushing this dialogue forwards to some sort of satisfactory political conclusion in the future. And this trouble of the last couple of weeks has only enlivened the community leaders here to get working harder, to have more conversations and more dialogue across this divide that you see behind me here, so that one day indeed it might be pulled down. There's still plenty of hope here, Jamie. It's not a lost cause.
Andrew Wilson in Belfast, thank you very much.
Well, Katie Hayward is Professor of Political Sociology at Queen's University Belfast. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. This is a very complicated situation, as Andrew was just saying, with many factors stoking the violence, Brexit being just one of them.
Yes, and of course, when we talk about violence, then it is about a mix of various influences. Some of those influences, as you've just heard, have been persistent since the beginning of the peace process. Paramilitary organisations still exist. Many of them are very closely connected to organised crime and benefit from scenes of chaos that we've noted recently. But more broadly, we have the importance of that wider political context. The Good Friday Belfast Agreement is underpinned by a good relationship between the British and Irish governments that was very carefully negotiated and managed over a long period of time, fostered through common membership of the European Union. Now, of course, the UK is no longer in the EU. That relationship has fundamentally changed, and we're seeing the ramifications of that very much now echoed in politics within Northern Ireland, anxieties in that front, and then now also on the streets.
So there's been something of a lull in the disturbances in recent days. Do you see things escalating again soon?
There is a worry that things could kick off again quite rapidly. And I know that many people are working very hard to try and avoid such a situation. There is a worry that as we approach the summer, oftentimes we do see riots in Northern Ireland around contentious events. There is a worry that that might be something that we see again with some violence associated with that. But we have to take it on a day-by-day basis at the moment, and we know that people are working hard to try and calm the situation down.
So Brexit and the imposition of a customs border in the Irish Sea has upset a delicate balance. Is there any credible alternative to the Northern Ireland Protocol if a hard border is to be avoided?
So this question of how you manage to avoid a hard Irish border has just persisted since the beginning of the Brexit process, and the protocol is a compromise. It's quite an unusual one, involving, as you say, checks down the Irish Sea. The hardness of that border and the extent of those checks and controls really do depend on the closeness or otherwise of the relationship that the UK wants to have with the EU. The fact is that if the UK wants to diverge from EU rules, then there will be checks and controls, and they have to take place somewhere. And there's been no credible alternative put forward as to how to manage that in a way that doesn't bring disruption. They've chosen to do it down the Irish Sea largely because it's more practical and easy to operate such a border. But you can see that any change to Northern Ireland's borders is seen as symbolically significant, politically significant, and does leave many people feeling uneasy.
Casey Hayward from Queen's University Belfast, many thanks indeed.
China has criticised the UK after the British Parliament described the treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang as genocide. British lawmakers have backed a motion stating Uyghurs were suffering crimes against humanity and called on the government to use international law to bring it to an end. China has denied the allegation.
Genocide existing in China's Xinjiang is a flat-out lie fabricated by anti-China forces. The Chinese government and all ethnic groups in Xinjiang firmly oppose and strongly condemn this. The UK has enough problems of its own. These British lawmakers should just mind their own business and do more for their voters.
French anti-terror police have opened an investigation following the fatal stabbing of a female police administrative worker near Paris. The attacker, who has been identified as a Tunisian national living legally in France, was shot dead by police during the incident at the entrance to a police station. Investigators say the man was not previously known to the security agencies.
French President Emmanuel Macron has paid tribute to the late Chadian President Idriss Déby at his funeral. Déby, who worked closely with French forces fighting Islamist militants in the Sahel region, was killed in a battle with rebels. Macron reiterated France's continued commitment for Chad and vowed to ensure stability.
Rescuers have recovered at least 10 bodies from a capsized rubber boat off the coast of Libya. It's thought 130 people were on board. The French humanitarian organisation SOS Méditerranée has been responding to several distress calls in the area in very rough seas. Another wooden boat with about 40 people on board is still missing.
The rescuers are searching for an Indonesian Navy submarine with 53 crew on board before the oxygen runs out. The vessel went missing on Wednesday during a routine training exercise. Officials say if the submarine is still intact, there would only be enough air to last until Saturday.
Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny says he is stopping his hunger strike, following advice from his doctors. Navalny started the hunger strike 3 weeks ago to demand proper medical care.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, another crisis for European football to tackle. This time, it's about who gets to host Euro 2020 fixtures and who's relegated.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. During the last year, as the impact of coronavirus became more apparent, there's been an increase in reported racism against people of Asian origin in parts of the UK, including Wales.
In a survey of those living and working in the country, some said they felt less safe. Yolo Abdavid reports.
Fueled by suspicions and fear as the virus spread across the world, so did racism. Even before the first lockdown last March, insults and oral abuse was directed towards some Asian minorities living in Wales.
When my son came home and told me that he was called coronavirus and deliberately coughed on, I thought, no, you should not have to put up with this behaviour. I've just sort of sucked it up, if you like, and just accepted what's happened, because I thought, I can deal with it. But when it's somebody that you love and somebody's close to you, you want to protect them.
Hate speech and racial slurs is not uncommon in the UK. Many, possibly most victims of it don't complain, despite racist and religious hate crime being illegal in Britain. Early last year, the Chinese in Wales Association began receiving calls for help. In a survey of members, 68 responded. 54% said they felt they experienced insults because of their race. 68% said they didn't feel safe in their daily lives. And 56% felt they had been victims of hate crime since the pandemic began.
There has been a lot of racism as a result of COVID, especially against the Chinese, because it came from, is believed to be from China.
Culturally, many in the Chinese community in Britain choose not to complain, and few report specific incidents of abuse to the police.
Our Chinese people don't bother to report. They're just willing to discuss and talk, and that's full stop. And I feel so difficult to persuade them to explore themselves to report to the police.
There have been instances where racism towards East Asians in the UK have spilled over into physical attacks. A University of Southampton lecturer was beaten in one such attack last February. Education is thought to be the best way to encourage change.
When the child says, I can't sit next to a brown person, where does it come from? From home. So once these children learn that that is wrong, they would be the ambassadors to bring about changes. And education is absolutely vital.
Various reports on racism against black and Asian minorities have been prepared for lawmakers in London and Cardiff. Lots of recommendations have been accepted, but encouraging and enforcing changes in society may be the hardest task of all. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN, London.
The Spanish city of Bilbao is threatening legal action against European football governing body UEFA after it was dropped as a host of Euro 2020.
Meanwhile, Barcelona has reiterated its support for the widely discredited European Super League. As Rahul Pathak now reports from Madrid, UEFA has plenty on its plate.
In the end, the decision to strip Bilbao of Euro 2020 hosting rights came down to one thing: the fact that their $250 million San Mamés stadium could only hold matches looking like this instead of this. UEFA had told the 12 original host cities that they had to confirm that at least 25% of their stadium capacity could be filled for the group games. That was a promise Bilbao could not keep due to the coronavirus restrictions currently in force in the Basque region. It was due to host 4 games, including all of Spain's group matches. They will now be played in Sevilla.
It's really disappointing. It was a huge disappointment that Bilbao won't be a host at Euro 2020. We had a lot of hope riding on it. It was a dream come true. The Basque Country institutions worked tirelessly and fought hard from 2014 when they managed to sign the agreement with UEFA. So it's really disappointing for both Bilbao and the whole Basque Country that we won't host a Euro 2020 match.
The Bilbao organisers have threatened legal action and are demanding compensation from UEFA, having seen 6 years of preparation count for nothing.
It's a fact that the requirement to have fans attend the San Mamés Stadium was not in the original contract. UEFA broke the agreement with the Basque Country government unilaterally. So it's only fair that we ask for financial compensation. To be honest, for the city, the harm is already done now.
For their part, the Basque regional government said there was no possibility of relaxing restrictions on public gatherings in time for the June kick-off. The area is currently in the grip of a fourth wave of the pandemic, and while hosting Euro 2020 would have brought undoubted economic benefits, the health considerations were the priority. Bilbao was joined by Dublin, another city that was dropped as a host, losing its 3 matches and leaving Euro 2020 with 10 venues for the month-long event. Well, it's certainly been a tumultuous week for UEFA. Firstly, they saw off the challenge of the breakaway European Super League, although Barcelona and Real Madrid insist that the project is not dead. They then flexed their muscles by dropping Bilbao and Dublin as Euro 2020 hosts, insisting that having fans in the stadium was non-negotiable. But it remains to be seen whether those fans will want to travel to the 10 remaining host cities this summer, with the pandemic in Europe showing no signs of abating. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
The Chinese city of Chengdu has launched its first international industry fair. Hundreds of companies from across the globe are showcasing their products in smart manufacturing. Meng Qingsheng reports.
The Metro Transit Show is a major highlight of the Chengdu International Industry Fair. CRRC, China's state-owned rolling stock manufacturer, presents its latest unmanned metro car model.
This train is equipped with various intelligent detection devices, like automatic obstacle detection and vehicle system detection. It also involves 5G technology for real-time communication and is able to report the vehicle's operating status to the control center.
The global rail giant is also displaying a prototype maglev train with a top speed of 600 kilometers per hour. It marks a major breakthrough for China in high-speed maglev development. Xinzhu Corporation in Sichuan province introduces an embedded maglev transport system developed by German company Max Boogie.
The design of this embedded maglev system involves smart technologies like wireless transmission and cloud computing. This allows the train to run at a minimum time interval between departures, meaning it can handle more passengers. Compared with other types of maglev systems, it's said to be much safer and can adapt to different weather conditions.
The industry fair brings together 600 leading industrial manufacturing companies.
Most of the manufacturing companies showcase their latest products and technologies. They are also making their debut after the pandemic with a focus on industrial solution of intelligent manufacturing.
The industrial automation sector exhibits key technologies like motion control systems, smart sensors, and power transmission.
I think many companies in China now would like to upgrade the systems in their manufacturing lines and also getting more efficient, getting better quality, and making the brand made in China be more international.
The fair also showcases the latest technologies in fields like robotics, new materials, and energy saving. Known as the world's factory, China tops the world in terms of manufacturing output. And now the country is moving closer toward building a digital factory and achieving smart manufacturing. Meng Qingsheng, CGTN, Chengdu, Sichuan Province.
Now, putting a new spin on waste not, want not, SpaceX has launched its third crew bound for the International Space Station in a recycled rocket and spacecraft. The cost-saving first is part of the key goals of the Tesla mission's lunar partnership with NASA.
And finally to the United States, where a pet dog has escaped its owners to join a Utah high school relay race. The dog, called Holly, can be seen running onto the track to chase the competitors down the home straight. Holly clocked 100 metres in about 10.5 seconds. That's 1 second behind Usain Bolt's record. The dog overtook the leading runner, but unfortunately wasn't officially crowned the winner. How'd that, Holly?
4 legs probably helps, I think, really. The headlines again. US President Joe Biden's planned tax hike for rich Americans has rattled the markets.
The EU signs the world's biggest vaccine supply deal as it aims to jab 70% of adults by July. And that is Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
We're on smart TV apps like Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and the CGTN app. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Bye.